Every game is important in the NFL, but this one coming up for the Steelers at injury-depleted Cincinnati seems like the kind of game that could put them over the top in the AFC wildcard race when it's all said and played out. And not only do the Steelers have a chance to put a division rival in the Bengals 2 games behind them, but they'd also set themselves up beautifully with a couple of home games against a couple of also-rans following. We've got Arizona and New England coming up at Acrisure Stadium after this matchup against the Bengals. But if you need any reminding that AFC North road games are not to be minimized, just remember last week and what the Steelers did against the Browns, regardless of who's playing quarterback even, which seems pretty relevant to preparations for this week as well. I'm Matt Gajtka. This is the Steelers Now pregame scout. Derrick Bell, the analyst at Steelers Now, joins me for another edition of the pregame scout. Back together again here after a week away for me, at least. And I did get a chance to watch most of the game last week, Derrick, so we don't have to rehash it too much. But what can you say except this is a Steelers team that has lived on the edge so much, and you can't expect to keep coming out on top in those close games.
Right. It's kind of like what we talked about, man. Like eventually that, I don't want to call it that one score luck, but because they do, find ways to win in those situations. But it's hard to rely on that style of winning. You talk about the margins in the NFL are really small. And, when you push every game to the limit of, the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, sometimes you're going to come out on the short end of the stick. And that's ultimately what happened. Credit to Cleveland. DTR made some throws on that final drive, but there were some positive takeaways. I thought the defense played really well. The run game played really well. But overall, man, just not enough points, and that led to some changes this week for the Steelers.
Of course, our top story, not to bury the lead any more than we already have, the Steelers offense under new management. Matt Gajtka fired, the Steelers' first time really in their modern era ever firing an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, or an assistant coach in the middle of a season. Kind of incredible to think about, but that's where we're at, and that tells you that times were certainly desperate. So running backs coach Eddie Faulkner is going to be elevated to replace, or has been elevated to replace, Canada as offensive coordinator, but QB coach Mike Sullivan is going to be calling the plays. So we got a couple of guys with some different perspectives here, Derrick. I don't know if I expect any drastic X's and O's changes, but what do you think is some of the low-hanging fruit that those two gentlemen and the rest of the offensive staff can try to tweak and twist around to get some better results here?
Yeah, I think the big thing, man, is just trying to, score more points. Mike Tomlin was not very shy about saying that was the reason that he made the decision that he made was, just not enough points on the scoreboard. As far as changes, it is going to be difficult because anytime you change, play callers, offensive coordinators, this seems like it's going to be a tag team approach between Faulkner and Mike Sullivan. It's going to be interesting to see, just how many tweaks they're going to be able to do, because it's not going to be wholesale changes. The offense, you can't install an entirely new offense week 12 or whatever of the season. It's just there's not enough time. There's reason that stuff gets done in the off season typically. But I mean, I think there are some low-hanging fruit topics that, they could potentially approach. We would love to see the Steelers be a little bit more diverse on offense. We would love to see them, use more play action. That's something we've been begging for a decade now. And who knows if that's going to come to fruition or not. But one of the things that I would like to see off that play action is just them push the ball down the field a little bit more. Instead of using play action, especially under center, to set up screens or, bootlegs to the flat or anything like that, use the play action game to push the ball down the field, because the Steelers haven't been able to do that in their drop back passing game. Use that to create some explosive plays on offense. And, I think with a play caller as well, Mike Sullivan hasn't called plays in a while, but I do think it's the quarterback coach taking over that responsibility is always nice, because, they have the best relationship with the quarterback. So he's going to know what Kenny Pickett likes. So we'll probably see even more input from him on what he likes or doesn't like in the playbook on a weekly basis. But I think really the main thing is, this offense is still going to run through the run game, and it should based on how they've played recently.
I know there are certain plays, bugaboo plays, that a lot of Steelers fans had with Matt Gajtka in charge of the offense. Jet sweeps, screens. There was that one screen pass that maybe wasn't even a screen pass last week against Cleveland that got a lot of publicity. Dan Orlovsky broke it down on Twitter saying, what is the point of this play? I tended to agree. I don't know if you had the same take on that, but there were some plays that just seemed to be dead on arrival. So do you think we're just not going to see those anymore? How do you feel about a lot of those, I don't want to call it misdirection, but there were a few of those that just didn't seem to be working at the pro level as well as they did, like when we saw Canada run the pit offense a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that you're going to see, a lot of the like the same motions. I think you're going to see some of the same like jet sweep stuff. I don't think that that's going to completely disappear from the playbook. And the Steelers aren't the only ones who like run that kind of stuff. But I do think just like one of my concerns with Canada in general, this is really dating back to before he was hired, was just the drop back passing is just so simplistic. And I had serious concerns about his ability to kind of orchestrate a modern NFL passing game. And unfortunately, those kind of came to fruition. And we saw how much he struggled with different offenses, different quarterbacks, and such. But I would really like to see Mike Sullivan, like I said, get back to some of the things that we've been asking for, throwing over the middle of the field, some more end breakers. They've got to stop. One of the things that's like particularly bugged me with their passing offense is um, they only really throw to the sideline, and those throws are less. They are more, I guess, risk averse. You don't see as many interceptions. Going over the middle of the field is typically a little more dangerous in terms of turning the football over. But you just can't rely solely on your passing game being, back shoulder fades and go balls and screens. It doesn't work. And we've seen the results. The numbers are what they are. Kenny Pickett hasn't thrown for over 160 yards in over a month now. So just tangible changes. I'm very interested to see what this offense looks like under Faulkner with Sullivan calling plays, because it's been a while since we've seen something different. So I'm curious on what little changes they can make going into this Cincinnati game.
Yeah, especially on this quick turnaround, that will be the test this week for those two gentlemen. Now, you mentioned about not throwing over the middle. That was probably more of a Matt Canada thing because we saw with Ben Roethlisberger too in his final season that there just wasn't a lot of action between the hash marks or even between the numbers for that matter. But there is no doubt that this takes away an excuse or an explanation or whatever you want to deem it as for Kenny Pickett just not being productive this year. And it really beggars belief, Derek, that we're at the point where we're talking about a guy who's apparently actively getting worse, it feels like, in some of these games. Now, there were some miscommunications, some things like that between he and his receivers. We can get to that a little bit later in this topic. But as far as Pickett's uninspiring results, this puts a lot of it on him, doesn't it? And how do you think he's going to respond to the change in leadership? Do you feel like, I guess a different way of putting it, do you feel like it really was the case of the coordinator and the game plan hamstringing Pickett?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think it takes away that variable in the equation, right? Like, I think that, the Steelers over the next 6, 7 weeks, they're going to learn, what was Matt Canada and what was Kenny Pickett. And I think, again, is it completely fair, in my opinion, to make these changes midseason and make these sweeping revelations about him or his future with Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan calling plays? No, because you're still running mostly the same offense, right? So that's not necessarily completely fair. But having said that, there are struggles beyond what Matt Canada's system was providing that Kenny Pickett still has to answer. But when you talk about guys that are regressing in year two, Kenny Pickett finished, I think, 24th in EPA per play last year as a rookie. Right now, I think he's 28th. So you're seeing some regression there. Only, I think, 4 or 5 touchdown passes on the season. They're just not putting up a lot of points. I think the big thing, man, is over these next 6, 7 weeks, you have to find something that you can latch onto, I think, of what Kenny Pickett does well. Whether that's things you can look for in a new coordinator, whether that's maybe weapons that you need to go get him to be able to access those strengths, whatever that may be, on how you're going to move forward with him as the leader of this team. And if you can't find anything that you can sit there and say, like, all right, he does this, this, and this really well, how are we going to function next year with him as the quarterback of this team? If you can't find those things, you have to have really serious conversations with yourself about what this future is going to look like, both in the short term and long term. Because that's kind of, I think, where I'm at personally is there are so many disadvantages that he was at with Canada's offense. But having said that, he wasn't doing the quarterbacking 101 type stuff very well either. We've seen him be less accurate this year. That's one of the biggest things. Like he's still processing extremely slow in year two. So those things are really concerning to me. And I think we got to find some sort of answers. And that's the biggest thing for me, even beyond like the Steelers making the playoffs and potentially getting blown out in the wild card by whoever or whatever. The biggest thing for me is like they need an answer on, is this dude the guy or not?
There were a couple of throws last week at Cleveland that were especially ugly. I thought people were taking some cheap shots actually at Pickett because we didn't quite know what was going on there. There was the go route down the sideline on the final drive, I believe it was. That wasn't within 20 yards of anybody. There was the throw he fired at Deontay Johnson's feet, I want to say in the first half sometime. It's all kind of blended together at a certain point. It was just flat ugly at the Browns. But I also don't feel like we can necessarily say that's definitely Kenny Pickett's fault. How much is on the receivers? Do you feel like they're just not making the connection with Pickett as well? And is that chemistry to blame for a lot of this decline that we've seen in the last several weeks?
Yeah, I think it's a multitude of different things. I think that it's very obvious that at least him and Deontay Johnson was not on like even remotely on the same page last week at all. A lot of miscommunications. In my opinion, I'm not sure if it's the exact play that you're referring to, but like there was one play that I remember where um, Johnson originally his cornerback that's he's lined up against is pressed up against him. So normally, if you get press coverage out there, sometimes you'll have adjustments built in where, all right, if you get press, I'm going to run a fade. But the cornerback actually bails out at the last minute, and he's playing more of like a side saddle technique. So Pickett sees that on his drop back that he's got his back to the sideline. Normally, if you see that, that means throw the comeback because it's like nearly impossible if you're a cornerback, if you have your back to the sideline to make a play on a comeback route or a hinge is what they call it. So it's just two guys not reading the coverage the exact same way. And then I know which clip you're talking about, the one that like sailed 50 yards over his head or whatever. I think Johnson was breaking his route off and Kenny was throwing the go ball. So those things, at least for me, I know they look ugly when you watch the tape, but I think those things are more easily corrected than some of the other struggles in the passing game, both schematically and just like his performance in general. But there's no doubt. I mean, when you have a passing offense that's struggling this much, I mean, it does go beyond the quarterback. It goes beyond the coordinator. The offensive line got absolutely whooped last week, and that, make no mistake about it, Cleveland's defense is elite. Like they deserve the credit. They took it to Pittsburgh in every single way. They dominated on every level. But for the Steelers to go in there and not even look like an NFL offense, that's what happens. Like people end up losing their job. So
And here we are now with a reset in the middle of the season. But guess what? The Steelers are still 6-4, even after the loss to Cleveland and DTR. And, well, just losing to the Browns overall, that's always a shock to the system for Steelers fans. It doesn't happen very much. And so here we sit going into the game at Cincinnati. Again, another AFC North road game. And I don't think there's any doubt that it feels like with the change in management for the offense, with all that's going on, the turnover on that side of the football, and just the way the offense has struggled all season long, that it's time once again for the defense to take the reins, to take charge here. This unit has not allowed more than 20 points to an opposing offense in 6 weeks. Joe Burrow's out for the year, so they don't have to worry about his strong arm. Is there anything we're missing here? Does it feel like, just to you, it's the type of day where they have to sell out to stop Joe Mixon in the running game, and if they do that, then they're going to have success?
yeah, so the Cincinnati offense is very interesting because we talk about how simplistic, the Steelers offense has been, over the past, decade or whatever. The Cincinnati offense is very predictable, I would say, but like just by nature. They're in 11 personnel 80% of the time. They're in shotgun over 90% of the time. They don't use play action. They don't use motion. It's really just kind of all right, we're going to roll the ball out there and we're going to trust our guys to be better than your guys. And for the most part, over the past couple seasons, The Bengals have been able to do that because the quarterback was playing at a really high level. That quarterback is now injured. They've got multiple receivers that are, number one caliber receiver. Jamar Chase, one of the best in the league. T. Higgins, probably the best or one of the best, like number two options in the league. But he's not going to play this week either. So it's really unfortunate for Bengals fans because I always think that these type of offenses are very difficult to replicate when you ask a backup quarterback to come in, because it's like, all right, well, this guy's not going to be able to come in and beat Joe Burrow, the Trent Irwin, those guys, Charlie Jones. Those guys aren't going to be able to come in and beat T. Higgins. So it is very predictable by nature. And I do think that stopping Joe Mixon is going to be the number one key. Mixon's had some success in the past against the Steelers in situations like this. So, shutting him down. He's a physical guy. He's very AFC North brand type of player. Him and Landon Roberts, that was a matchup that I highlighted this week for Steelers Now. Very excited about seeing those two guys go head to head because it's going to be a old school smash mouth battle.
Who are some guys on the defensive side for the Steelers that have pleasantly surprised you this year? We knew about the playmakers off the rush. We know about Watt and Highsmith. Fitzpatrick's been out for a couple of weeks, but we knew what he can do. And we had a good feeling that maybe a Joey Porter Jr. could step in and do what he has done so far. You mentioned Roberts. Is there anybody else that you feel like deserves some credit there? Because defensive side of the ball, if you're not putting up the flashy stats, a lot of times what you're doing is getting ignored by the general public.
Yeah, I think really one of the questions I had was how this linebacker room was going to work. It's just really unfortunate that Quan and Cole Holcomb ended up getting injured because I thought both of those guys were playing really solid ball. But I'll just go back to Landon Roberts, man. Like, I really do think that he has been such a perfect fit for what they needed. Roberts having that tone setting mentality, excellent run defender. He's first right now among linebackers in run stop rate, according to Pro Football Focus, and that shows you like just how much of an impact he's had in that area of the game. But I just think bringing physicality back to that position has meant so much to the defense. And just other surprises. Joey Porter Jr., like corners, man, like traditionally, 5-10 years ago, rookie corners were just absolutely terrible. You couldn't put them out there without them being an extremely liability. I think over the past couple of years, that transition's been a little bit easier. But Porter, man, he's played fantastic. I mean, you cannot ask for a better play than what you've gotten from him so far. And even like I'll even say like another kind of surprise has been how Patrick Peterson's played over the past couple of weeks. I thought he had another really good game last week. I do think that there are some obvious athletic limitations at this point in his career, but you're seeing his length show up. You're seeing some of his veteran savvy, his football IQ show up in the past couple of weeks. And I think that, him playing more in the slot has been good for this defense. And I think, I think that there's a realistic expectation that could continue over the course of the season.
And is there anything to nitpick? I know that when you give up, 10 points, 15 points, 20 points, that's a win in the NFL. Even this year where it seems like the defenses are pushing back, but we did see the Browns orchestrate a game-winning drive under the gun there when the Steelers couldn't do that, obviously, the previous possession. So is there anything that's sticking out that they might have to try to shore up here in the final 7 games of the season?
Yeah, I mean, man, it's so difficult because there's obviously plays that you want back. Like, I thought Porter had his roughest game of the season last week against Amari Cooper. Cooper ended up having, 4 or 5 catches on him. There was a penalty. There was another penalty they missed on a hands of the face from him as well. So, I mean, but really, even like those little things, man. Pretty much all of Cooper's catches were coming on like diamond or outside release slants. Those are really difficult to defend with the type of technique that Porter plays with. But it's not like it's not fixable. You know what I'm saying? And we also have to remember, like, Amari Cooper has been one of the best route runners since he entered the league. I mean, he's been doing this for a very long time. So I don't really have like too many complaints. I would say that, one of the complaints that I remember seeing on just Sunday when we were all watching the game was, where's the pass rush? Where's the pass rush? That's been a small complaint of mine. There have been some situations, particularly against Green Bay, where the pass rush just wasn't getting home. Their pressure rates with 4 guys haven't been very good, especially on like third down. I think they're 28th in the league. I'm not sure what they finished with last week, but DTR was just getting the ball back so quick. I mean, you look at the Browns passing game from last week. They ran stick, Hank, Dragon. I mean, it was all quick game. He's taking one step, no hitch, throwing the ball. I mean, as a pass rusher, there's nothing you can do with that. I mean, the ball's just coming out in 2 seconds. There's no way you can get to the quarterback. So, I mean, credit to Cleveland, but 250, 260 yards or whatever and 13 points on like 12 possessions. It's good enough to win. The offense got to give, some type of support like we talked about. I mean, it just can't be just the defense.
Yeah, the problem is the standard is just so high right now on the defense. If they hope to
Yeah.
win a game, they've
Got
got
to
to
be perfect.
got to be perfect or damn near close, it seems like. Okay, fourth down, some individual matchups you highlighted on Steelers Now. Go to SN Plus for all of Derrick's content on our website. And well worth your time. He's got his dudes and duds after each game, and also now looking forward to some matchups here. You mentioned Pat Freiermuth, kind of the forgotten man for the Steelers this season. Injuries have also hampered him, or one injury in particular that kept him out for a while. But overall, the Steelers have just not used the tight end. And I think that goes part and parcel with them just not using the middle of the field, too. So perhaps that was a scheme thing as well. But you seem to think that Pat might have an opportunity this week against a particular Bengals safety, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals, one of the changes on defense for them is, they've got two new safeties. They lost Jesse Bates, Von Bell in free agency this past offseason. Dax Hill was a guy I liked a good amount coming out of Michigan. He's been fine, but his partner, Nick Scott, recently benched. They were going to roll with Jordan Battle, rookie from Alabama. Battle's a talented kid, but the Bengals just over the course of the season, their defense has not been very good, to be honest with you, which has kind of been a little bit surprising because the Bengals under Lou Anarumo have been a above average to good defense. They just haven't really been talked about a whole lot because of just how many fireworks their offense has traditionally put up. But I do think that there's been some opportunities with the tight end position to expose that defense. They've gotten absolutely blitzed by tight ends over the course of the season. If I remember correctly, I think they've given up like the third or fourth most yards to tight ends so far. And Freiermuth, like you mentioned, he has been absolutely non-existent for the Steelers offense, even when he's been in the lineup. I think he only had one catch last week, and it was on a screen pass. But this Bengals passing defense, they're 28th drop back success rate. I mean, they've had trouble stopping the run and the pass this season. So if Freiermuth was ever gonna like show back up and get reintegrated into this offense, I feel like it's got to be this week.
Also on that side of the ball, starting corner Cam Taylor-Britt probably out for the Bengals. He didn't practice all week, didn't practice on Friday. He's got 4 interceptions on the season. He's been a nice revelation for them, so he might be out too. So we could be seeing a lot more open space for the Steelers receivers in general. But on the other side of the ball, Joey Porter Jr. likely shadowing Jamar Chase. He's the Bengals' biggest weapon remaining, it would seem. No offense to Mixon. So how do you feel about Porter's chances in that one?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't think that it's necessarily a revelation or a surprise, right, that Porter's going to follow the opposing team's best receiver. They really allowed him to do that, and I actually like the decision. I like giving him that challenge. As far as Chase, man, one of the things about Chase is that I particularly worry about is, one, he's an underrated route runner. Like, he's really came a long way in terms of beating press coverage. He has a better release package than he did coming into the league. But another thing about Chase, when he gets the ball, like, he's really difficult to tackle. You wouldn't think it maybe with the way that he looks, but he is extremely good after the catch. I anticipate that they're probably going to lean into a similar game plan as Cleveland did last week, get the ball out quick. You're probably going to see them attack Porter with some slants because he struggled with that last week. But Chase, he like hardly ever gets tackled by the first player. So Porter, if there's one weakness that he's had really all season long, it's been tackling. Well, you miss a tackle on Chase and that 4.3, 4.4 speed, there's a chance that can go for a home run. So that'd be the biggest thing for me in terms of what to focus on. Jake Browning, I anticipate the Steelers are going to really, really test him and see if he can push the ball down the field. I just don't think that they're going to be overly afraid of him pushing the ball down the field for big plays. I think they'll be aggressive.
And one aspect we haven't quite talked about, at least in length on this episode, is the Steelers' run game. Jaylen Warren had a success rate of around 70% or more last week. It seems like to me he is slowly but surely elevating himself to the Steelers' number one back, depending on how you feel about Najee Harris, of course. But Warren's getting some publicity nationwide. I feel like he's no longer our little secret here in Pittsburgh. So what do you think is important for the Steelers to get him or to keep him engaged as he has been the last few weeks.
Yeah, man.